In our last video, we were in the Tampa suburb of Safety Harbor, where we took a stroll along the main street of downtown. We checked out the beautiful waterfront, and hiked along the fabulous boardwalk and nature trail. In this video,
we're in Tarpon Springs, Florida.
Okay, as usual, Kara, why don't you get us started by telling us about this great little city on the Gulf Coast of Central Florida.
Tarpon Springs was settled in 1876 and incorporated in 1887. It was initially developed as a winter spot for wealthy Northerners. It currently has a population of about 25,000 people, and of note, it has the highest percentage of Greek Americans of any city in the United States.
So that Greek heritage largely explains the videos and pictures we're seeing now. Tarpon Springs is known as the sponge capital of the world, a trade that was brought here by the early Greek settlers.
In the 1880s, the first local sponge businesses were formed, and many people came up from Key West and even the Bahamas to process the sponges. In 1905, a technique of sponge diving was introduced, and they actually brought divers and crew members over from Greece. This is the oldest known form of underwater diving. And soon this industry was generating millions of dollars a year, so it's huge for this area. From the sponge harvesting came the whole industry of tourism as well, and you can take out cruises and learn more about the sponge history. Even to this day, Tarpon Springs is still the world's largest producer of natural sponges. The sponge docks are sitting right on the Anclote River, which in turn empties into the Gulf of Mexico.
If you decide to visit, the sponge docks are located on Dodecanese Boulevard, hopefully I'm saying that right, which is going to be very busy during certain times of the year, but there is ample parking. At the time we made this video, it was $5 for the day. During the peak season, expect this area to be very busy, and if you want to eat at any of the absolutely incredible Greek restaurants, it's highly recommended that you make reservations. Or do what we do and consider going in the off times.
The reason this video doesn't reflect how busy it actually gets here is we filmed this in the middle of summer, so we got there first thing in the morning before it got too hot. Many of the businesses either were just opening or hadn't opened yet. Here's a perfect example of a boat returning full of sponges. If you're like us and you don't know what a natural sea sponge actually is, thankfully, the internet gave us some information. They are the simplest multicellular organisms alive. While they're classified as animals rather than plants because they don't photosynthesize, in every other way they're similar to plants. They don't have brains, digestive systems, circulatory or nervous systems, and once rooted, they don't move.
For those that might be concerned, since sponges are 100% natural, they're completely eco-friendly and biodegradable. They're also harvested in a way that allows them to regrow. So our game plan when we arrived was to follow the sponge docks down as far as they go, and so you know, they don't go very far. It's probably the equivalent of maybe 4 or 5 city blocks. So we returned on the other side, and then after we were done exploring this area, we'll take off and check out the downtown. As Caroline mentioned earlier, we were here very early in the morning, which created a rather eerie experience because, as you can see, there's literally nobody on the streets but us. On the plus side, It's so hot this time of year, hot and miserably humid, that it was about the only time we knew we could actually enjoy ourselves.
If you're there in the summer, a great way to spend the day would be to go out on one of many of their tour boat cruises. We were there a little bit too early just before all the tours were going out.
So as I mentioned before, this isn't a super long stretch. You can see straight ahead is pretty much where this street ends. So we decided to work our way back on the other side and then eventually work our way through the neighborhoods towards the old downtown.
Like many tourist cities, there is a trolley available. This one goes between the downtown and the sponge docks.
Or if you're like us and prefer to do your explorations on foot, we were able to see both the sponge dock area as well as the historic downtown, which were all in walking distance from where we parked.
If you like street art and building murals, you can see here and throughout this video there were many great examples.
By this time, we'd managed to walk around enough and kill enough time that the stores and the restaurants and bakeries were starting to open.
The Greek restaurants, markets, and bakeries here are known as being some of the best in the country.
If you're into shopping, this place is definitely geared towards tourists. Here we are at what is called the Sponge Exchange Mall.
So at this point, we've turned down a side street and we wanted to work our way through the residential area and then to downtown.
If you watch our videos, you hear me say this all the time, but this is a perfect example of why you want to get off the main streets and explore some of the other areas. This was a really cool strip.
And Jeff's brewery radar did not let us down. This side street took us to one of several local breweries that we found in Tarpon Springs.
If you're like us and you enjoy checking out local breweries when you travel, Central Florida, particularly around the Tampa Bay area, has been an absolute mecca. Every little town we go into seems to have multiple breweries. It's fantastic.
We are now entering the Tarpon Springs Historic District. It covers about 700 acres and contains 145 historic buildings. We're in Tarpon Springs today. We started at the sponge docks because harvesting sponges is what this area is known for. Going back to the early 1900s, people from Greece came over, brought that craft with them, and it is still a working dock today. So it's a combination of a tourist area where you can go out on cruises and go into little shops and restaurants, and an actual working sponge dock harbor. We're really enjoying it. Now we're headed to downtown to see the old historic district. This is St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, which was built in 1943. It's pretty impressive.
And here's the trolley Caroline referenced earlier. For those that may be parked at the sponge docks that still want to explore the downtown, there's a great option for you if you don't like to walk. So before Caro breaks out the phone to read some facts, I have to say this was a very pleasant surprise. For those of you that want to visit, the downtown is located just next to what's called Alternate Highway 19. This can be a little confusing because the main highway is 19 and this one is called Alternate 19. But you do need to kind of step off of it a little bit to get into the heart of this downtown. And when you get there, you'll find all sorts of really cute restaurants and shops. It was a really great find. Intersecting the downtown is the Pinellas Bike Trail, as you can see here. Caro, what can you tell us about this trail?
The Pinellas Trail is a 45-mile rail trail that goes from Tarpon Springs to St. Petersburg, which is one of our upcoming videos. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the Florida historic districts. There are 145 buildings here that are all part of the National Registry of Historic Places. Here you can see the historic Tarpon Springs train depot. It's been around for more than 100 years. Today it serves as the official Tarpon Springs Welcome Center as well as a museum. It's open Wednesday through Saturday from 11 to 3. This mural commemorates one of the early settlers to the Tarpon Springs area. She had a great love for gardening and nature and actually helped plant many of the trees in the area.
And our final stop in the historic downtown is the City Hall. Caro, what can you tell us about it?
It was completed in 1915 for a cost of $12,000. Initially, besides being City Hall, it served as the public library, the fire department, and the police department. You might be wondering how Tarpon Springs got its name. Legend has it that one of the early settlers, Mary Ormond Boyer, was standing on the banks of the Spring Bayou and saw fish jumping. She said, "Look at the Tarpon Spring." Even though those fish were probably mullet, the people liked the ring of the name.
So at this point, we've done a pretty thorough exploration of the sponge docks and the historic downtown, so it was time to finally stop and get something to eat and try some local brews. We made our way to Captain Jack's, right on the water. It was fantastic. And with that said, let's wrap this video up. So what do you think of Tarpon Springs, Florida?
I think Tarpon Springs is great. Not only does it have the sponge docks, which is really unique, but what a cute old historic downtown. Lots of fun restaurants and shops, breweries. What's not to love?
Yeah, the sponge docks are what make this place famous, and clearly the first part of the video reflects that. I mean, it's really fantastic. What we didn't know about was this cute little downtown. We've driven by the old alternative 19 highway, but it just sort of skirts on the outside of the downtown. So this is our first foray actually into this area, and both of us were pleasantly surprised. It's really cool. So overall, an absolute thumbs up. And if you come into Tarpon Springs, don't just go to the sponge docks. Take a stroll through the downtown. I think you'll find it to be a really cool place. Agreed?
Agreed, for sure.
All right, get off the couch and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.